Xenosystems Fragments. Meta-neocameralism. Nickland. Narrated by Skeptical Waves. First thing, meta-neocameralism isn't anything new, and it certainly isn't anything post-Moldbugian. It's no more than neocameralism apprehended in its most abstract features, through the coining of a provisional and dispensable term. It allows for an acronym that doesn't lead to confusions with North Carolina, while encouraging quite different confusions, which I'm pretending not to notice. Locally, to this blog, the meta is the mark of a prolegomenon, to a disciplined discussion of neocameralism which has later to take place. Its abstraction is introductory, in accordance with something that is yet to be restarted, or reanimated, in detail. For existing detail, outside the Moldbug canon itself, look here. The excellent comment thread here provides at least a couple of crucial clues. Nidraku, March 23, 2014 at 6:47 p.m. Neocameralism doesn't answer questions like that, on the specifics of social organization. Instead, it's a mechanism for answering questions like that. You can ask, is Coke considered better than RC Cola? Or you can institute capitalism and find out. You can ask, are ethno-nationalist states considered better than mixed states? Or you can institute the patchwork and find out. Riverk, March 23, 2014 at 3:44 a.m. Neocameralism is, if viewed in this light, a political system. It is not a political system but a system for implementing political systems. Of course, the same guy who came up with it also invented an operating system, a system for implementing software systems. MNC, then, is not a political prescription, for instance a social ideal aligned with techno-commercialist preferences. It is an intellectual framework for examining systems of governance, theoretically formalized as disposals of sovereign property. The social formalization of such systems, which Moldbug also advocates, can be parenthesized within MNC. We are not at this stage considering the model of a desirable social order, but rather the abstract model of social order in general, apprehended radically, at the root, where to rule and to own lack distinct meanings. Sovereign property is sovereign and primary because it is not merely a claim, but effective possession. There is much more to come in later posts on the concept of sovereign property, some preliminary musings here. Because MNC is an extremely powerful piece of cognitive technology, capable of tackling problems at a number of distinct levels, in principle, an unlimited number, it is clarified through segmentation into an abstraction cascade. Descending through these levels adds concreteness, and tilts incrementally towards normative judgments, framed by the hypothetical imperative of effective government, as defined within the cascade. The highest level of practical significance, since MNC theology need not delay us, has already been touched upon. It applies to social regimes of every conceivable type, assuming only that a systematic mode of sovereign property reproduction will essentially characterize each. Power is economic irrespective of its relation to modern conventions of commercial transaction, because it involves the disposal of a real, if obscure, quantity, which is subject to increase or decrease over the cyclic course of its deployment. Population, territory, technology, commerce, ideology, and innumerable additional heterogeneous factors are components of sovereign property, power, but their economic character is assured by the possibility, and indeed necessity, of more or less explicit trade-offs and cost-benefit calculations, suggesting an original, if germinal, fungibility, which is merely arithmetical coherence. This is presupposed by any estimation of growth or decay, success or failure, strengthening or weakening, of the kind required not only by historical analysis, but also by even the most elementary administrative competence. Without an implicit economy of power, no discrimination could be made between improvement and deterioration, and no directed action toward the former could be possible. The effective cyclic reproduction of power has an external criterion, survival. It is not open to any society or regime to decide for itself what works. Its inherent understanding of its own economics of power is a complex measurement, gauging a relation to the outside, whose consequences are life and death. Built into the idea of sovereign property from the start, therefore, is an accommodation to reality. Foundational to MNC, at the very highest level of analysis, is the insight that power is checked primordially. On the outside are wolves, serving as the scourge of Neon. Even the greatest of all imaginable god-kings, Asomfnargl included, has ultimately to discover consequences, rather than inventing them. There is no principle more important than this. Entropy will be dissipated, idiocy will be punished, the weak will die. If the regime refuses to bow to this law, the wolves will enforce it. Social Darwinism is not a choice societies get to make, but a system of real consequences that envelops them. MNC is articulated at the level, which cannot be transcended, where realism is mandatory for any social order. Those unable to create it, through effective government, will nevertheless receive it, in the harsh storms of nemesis. Order is not defined within itself, but by the law of the outside. At this highest level of abstraction, therefore, when MNC is asked which type of regimes do you believe in, the sole appropriate response is those compatible with reality. Every society known to history, and others beside, had a working economy of power, at least for a while. Nothing more is required than this for MNC to take them as objects of disciplined investigation. Knowing that realism is not an optional regime value, we are able to proceed down the MNC cascade with the introduction of a second assumption: civilizations will seek gentler teachers than the wolves. If it is possible to acquire some understanding of collapse, it will be preferred to the experience of collapse, once the wolves have culled the ineducable from history. Everything survivable is potentially educational, even a mauling by the wolves. MNC, however, as its name suggests, has reason to be especially attentive to the most abstract lesson of the outside, the logical priority of meta-learning. It is good to discover reality, before, or at least not much later than, reality discovers us. Enduring civilizations do not merely know things, they know that it is important to know things, and to absorb realistic information. Regimes, disposing of sovereign property, have a special responsibility to instantiate this deuteroculture of learning to learn, which is required for intelligent government. This is a responsibility they take upon themselves because it is demanded by the outside, and even in its refinement, it still smells of wolf. Power is under such compulsion to learn about itself that recursion, or intellectualization, can be assumed. Power is selected to check itself, which it cannot do without an increase in formalization, and this is a matter, as we shall see, of immense consequence. Of necessity, it learns to learn, or dies, but this lesson introduces a critical tragic factor. The tragedy of power is broadly coincident with modernity. It is not a simple topic, and from the beginning two elements in particular require explicit attention. Firstly, it encounters the terrifying, second-order, truth that practical learning is irreducibly experimental. Ingoing meta-knowledge becomes scientific, which means that failure cannot be precluded through deduction, but has to be incorporated into the machinery of learning itself. Nothing that cannot go wrong is capable of teaching anything. Even the accumulation of logical and mathematical truths requires cognitive trial and error, ventures into dead ends, and the pursuit of misleading intuitions. Secondly, in becoming increasingly formalized, and ever more fungible, the disposal of sovereign power attains heightened liquidity. It is now possible for power to trade itself away, and an explosion of social bargaining results. Power can be exchanged for mere wealth, or for social peace, or channeled into unprecedented forms of radical regime philanthropy, religious sacrifice. Combine these two elements, and it is clear that regimes enter modernity empowered by new capabilities for experimental auto-dissolution. Trade authority away to the masses in exchange for promises of good behavior? Why not give it a try? Cascade Stage 2 MNC thus, realistically, assumes a world in which power has become an art of experimentation, characterized by unprecedented calamities on a colossal scale, while the economy of power and the techno-commercial economy have been radically desegmented, producing a single, uneven, but incrementally smoothed system of exchangeable social value, rippling ever outward, without firm limit. Socio-political organization, and corporate organization, are still distinguished by markers of traditional status, but no longer strictly differentiable by essential function. The modern business of government is not merely business only because it remains poorly formalized. As the preceding discussion suggests, this indicates that economic integration can be expected to deepen as the formalization of power proceeds. Moldbug seeks to accelerate this process. An inertial assumption of distinct public and private spheres is quickly disturbed by thickening networks of exchange, swapping managerial procedures and personnel, funding political ambitions, expending political resources in commercial lobbying efforts, trading economic assets for political favors, denominated in votes, and in general consolidating a vast, highly liquid reservoir of amphibiously corporocratic value, indeterminable between wealth and authority. Wealth power interconvertibility is a reliable index of political modernity. MNC does not decide that government should become a business. It recognizes that government has become a business, dealing in fungible quantities. However, unlike private business ventures, which dissipate entropy through bankruptcy and market-driven restructuring, governments are reliably the worst-run businesses in their respective societies, functionally crippled by defective, structurally dishonest organizational models, exemplified most prominently by the democratic principle: government is a business that should be run by its customers, but actually can't be. Everything in this model that isn't a lie is a mistake. At the second, descending, level of abstraction, then, MNC is still not recommending anything except theoretical clarity. It proposes power is destined to arrive at experimental learning processes. As it learns, it formalizes itself, and becomes more fungible. Experiments in fungible power are vulnerable to disastrous mistakes. Such mistakes have in fact occurred, in a near-total way. For deep historical reasons, techno-commercial business organization emerges as the preeminent template for government entities, as for any composite economic agent. It is in terms of this template that modern political dysfunction can be rendered, formally intelligible. Take the MNC abstraction elevator down another level, and it's still more of an analytic tool than a social prescription. That's a good thing, really. It tells us that every government, both extant and potential, is most accessible to rigorous investigation when apprehended as a sovereign corporation. This approach alone is able to draw upon the full panoply of theoretical resources, ancient and modern, because only in this way is power tracked in the same way it has actually developed, in tight alignment with a still incomplete trend. The most obvious objections are, sensu stricto, romantic. They take a predictable, which is not to say a casually dismissible, form. Government, if perhaps only lost or yet unrealized government, is associated with higher values than those judged commensurable with the techno-commercial economy, which thus sets the basis for a critique of the MNC business ontology of governance as an illegitimate intellectual reduction, and ethical vulgarization. To quantify authority as power is already suspect. To project its incremental liquidation into a general economy, where leadership integrates, ever more seamlessly, with the price system, appears as an abominable symptom of modernist nihilism. Loyalty, or the intricately related concept of asabiya, serves as one exemplary redoubt of the romantic cause. Is it not repulsive, even to entertain the possibility that loyalty might have a price? Handel addresses this directly in the comment thread already cited, March 24, 2014 at 1:18 a.m. A small sample captures the line of his engagement. Loyalty preservation incentivizing programs are various and highly sophisticated and span the spectrum everywhere from frequent flyer miles to clubs that are so engrossing and time-consuming and such as to mimic the fulfillment of all the community, socialization, and identitarian psychological functions that would make even the hardest core religious traditionalist jealous. Because lots of people are genetically programmed with this coordination subroutine that is easily exploitable in a context far removed from its evolutionary origins. Sometimes brands deserve special competitive loyalty, German engineering, and sometimes they don't, Tylenol branded paracetamol. There is vastly more that can, and will, be said in prosecution of this dispute, since it is perhaps the single most critical driver of NRX fission, and it is not going to endure a solution. The cold MNC claim, however, can be pushed right across it. Authority is for sale, and has been for centuries, so that any analysis ignoring this exchange nexus is an historical evasion. Marx's MCM, through which monetized capital reproduces and expands itself through the commodity cycle, is accompanied by an equally definite NPM or PMP cycle of power circulation enhancement through monetized wealth. A tempting reservation, with venerable roots in traditional society, is to cast doubt upon the prevalence of such exchange networks, on the assumption that power, possibly further dignified as authority, enjoys a qualitative supplement relative to common economic value, such that it cannot be retro-transferred. Who would swap authority for money, if authority cannot be bought, and is, indeed, beyond price? But this problem resolves itself, since the first person to sell political office, or its less formal equivalent, immediately demonstrates that it can no less easily be purchased. From the earliest, most abstract stage of this MNC outline, it has been insisted that power has to be evaluated economically, by itself, if anything like practical calculation directed towards its increase is to be possible. Once this is granted, MNC analysis of the governmental entity in general as an economic processor, i.e. a business, acquires irresistible momentum. If loyalty, asabiya, virtue, charisma and other elevated, or incommensurable, values are power factors, then they are already inherently self-economizing within the calculus of statecraft. The very fact that they contribute, determinately, to an overall estimation of strength and weakness, attests to their implicit economic status. When a business has charismatic leadership, reputational capital, or a strong culture of company loyalty, such factors are monetized as asset values by financial markets. When one prince surveys the quality of another's domain, he already estimates the likely expenses of enmity. For modern military bureaucracies, such calculations are routine. Incommensurable values do not survive contact with defense budgets. Yet, however ominous this drift, From a romantic perspective, MNC does not tell anybody how to design a society. It says only that an effective government will necessarily look, to it, like a well-organized, sovereign, business. To this one can add the riders. Government effectiveness is subject to an external criterion, provided by a selective trans-state and interstate mechanism. This might take the form of patchwork pressure, dynamic geography, in a civilized order, or military competition in the wolf-prowled wilderness of Hobbesian chaos. Under these conditions, MNC calculative rationality can be expected to be compelling for states themselves, whatever their variety of social form. Some considerable convergence upon norms of economic estimation and arrangement is thus predictable from the discovered contours of reality. There are things that will fail. Non-economic values are more easily invoked than pursued. Fossity, commenting here, March 23, 2014 at 11:59 a.m., writes, "No one disputes that the goal of society is a good citizenry, but the question is what sort of government provides that outcome. As best I can tell, we only have two theories of governance that have been expressed. The first is the capitalist. As Adam Smith noted, the best corporations, by all measures, are the ones that are operated for clear, measurable and selfish motives. The second is the communist. In this system, corporations are run for the benefit of everyone in the world. Unsurprisingly, corporations run on the latter principle have found an incredibly large number of ways to suck. Not coincidentally, so have 20th century governments run on the same principle. I think it's nearly impossible to overstate the ways in which everyone would be better off if we had an efficiently, effective, and responsive government. I realize this doesn't work in Greek, but systematic before-after confusion is an outside-in thing.